All right, let's move on.
Yeah.
To one of the big releases of the last couple of weeks. Brace yourselves,
Yeah.
boys. We're talking Final
Yeah.
Fantasy 16. So,
Beloved game by all.
Yeah, do you guys like Spirits Within? I think that's a good way to let's just throw it all out here.
I actually did like Spirits
I remember
Within.
liking it at the time because I was like, "Whoa, look at the graphics!" But now, I remember watching it. Whoa, this is terrible.
At the time, I remember watching it and going, "I've never seen anything like this." And graphically,
Yes.
like I was blown away, and I want to keep that memory like that. And I don't want to revisit it, thank you. But I'm
smart.
a Kingdom Hearts liker, so what do I fucking know?
Yep.
That's
Who
a
wants
good
to start?
that's a good way to set things up. I think for
Yes.
me personally, I have a tolerance for Final Fantasy games, even like newer ones where there are always going to be weird, bizarre elements, and it may not always come together right. But I think I just like being in the Final Fantasy mentality so much that it kind of clouds my judgment. I think 16 is extremely flawed, but fun. What? Why are you laughing?
When you said
You said
when
clouds,
you
my judgment, and at least you went.
Oh, Cloud like the man.
Yeah,
Wow.
like the man.
Just like the man with the big sword.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it definitely has a. So I'm glad people are loving it, and I know it's always going to be people's first Final Fantasy, and that's always going to be significant to people. One of my favorite first big exposures to it, where I like really went all in, was I played 7, but then 10 was my big one, and then like I went online, and people were like, "You like 10?" So it's always going to be like that. It's like poetry. It rhymes. It's always going to be like a thing. So I think 16 is weird, but I still kind of like it. But I think I see people thinking like it's the best game ever. They haven't gotten through it all yet.
That's the thing, because I haven't finished it yet, and I'm still very much in love with it.
Okay.
But also, I am not. First of all, I'm not necessarily hung up on like older Final Fantasies because I came into the franchise pretty late, like 12. And even then, I didn't play 13. I dabbled in 14, played 15. And like I said, I'm a Kingdom Hearts liker. I think there needs to be a phrase for not a suspension of disbelief, but a suspension of things when you're playing a Final Fantasy game. Because like Jake said, I like being in that world. I love the earnestness. I like the vibes. But there needs to be some kind of phrase for it. So I'm opening up to you, our lovely users, to see what it's like.
Final
Like a
fuckery
suspension of...
is what it has. That's like, so 15,
that.
like I'll lay it all out right now. I really, really like 15. I absolutely understand the criticisms, and the base
same.
game, I finished it and I was like, what happened? What was that? What did I just play? But I liked it. I was intrigued the whole way.
Yep.
Yeah. Those boys, man.
Yeah, I liked in the end, because I played 15 well after launch, and I was like, this definitely sucks. There's no doubt about it, right? It's like it definitely does. But at the same time, it just has these things that really ping, and that, there's a chance they connect with you. But I also think that 15 was quite an ambitious title when you think about it in many aspects, because it was the game to make that jump to an open world, to an open world thing. I don't think that worked, because you could really see what they were doing with that. And you could see what they were doing with that kind of ensemble cast of the 4 bros and the style of storytelling that was going on there. They obviously had that entirely new combat system as well. Just the same way that Final Fantasy 16 does. But I think that was quite an ambitious game on many fronts. And I guess this is sort of just leading into my criticisms of Final Fantasy 16. Like, I think that was really trying to say, what is Final Fantasy 16? What is Final Fantasy? What are its core elements? And then how do we take those to the next level? And I think Final Fantasy 16 sort of says, like, we've got a combat system, we've got some cutscenes, and it wasn't really focused on anything else. It wasn't trying to be ambitious with its RPG systems. It wasn't trying to be ambitious with its like open world design and the way to approach things and side quests and whatever. It was trying to be ambitious with its massive spectacle moments and its combat. And those things, they worked for sure. And I think people have different opinions on how good that combat is and its longevity and depth and whatever else. But I don't think anyone can question the highs that this game gets to and just how high they are. Like, they are fucking wild and crazy.
Unbelievable.
Totally. And I think that it's coming back to what I said earlier, which is like there are going to be some things with Final Fantasy 16 that might ping with you, and then and they're enough, and they're just like, that's enough for me to really love this game, just like it was with Final Fantasy 15, even though they're both flawed in many ways. But I think the difference for me personally is that I think Final Fantasy 15 was trying to do a lot of different things and trying to do it while still sort of remaining. A lot of the RPG stuff was consistent and the approach to exploration was consistent. It was trying to push into those spaces, whereas Final Fantasy 16 just wasn't interested in that. It's like, no, we are doing two things here. We're doing combat and cutscenes, and that's it. And so for that reason, I found it less interesting and less ambitious than previous Final Fantasy games. And I guess that was one of my bigger challenges with it. So
I think it struggled with
that's
a sort of kind of maybe it's almost like they had the like, okay, the spectacle, the combat, and then they're like, oh, well, like you still need to like walk around and do stuff. Because that's what you do in Final Fantasy games. You're going to walk around and do stuff. You're going to say hello to a chocobo. You're going to go weird diversions. And I think that it kind of struggles under that more than anything because it's like a pacing thing. I think this might be almost like a critic thing or a reviewer thing where maybe it's better enjoyed in small bites because some of those things you do in between the big moments in the game just really bored me. I think that also might also just be a testament to how crazy the highs are, where it's like any sort of come down from that is just, it's like a Sora's Wrath. Like there are parts of it that I was like, am I playing a Sora's Wrath? This is wild. It's and I use this phrase a lot. It's an overused phrase, like identity crisis, but it certainly has some of that. And a crisis reference. Sorry.
I don't think it's an identity crisis at all. Like, I think this is exactly what they intended because it's exactly what they needed. And maybe this is speculative, but I think this is their come to Jesus or I don't know, come to Jenova moment where it's like they reached the point where they understood. It goes back to like the cost of making games for me. I feel like that they understood that they can no longer make Final Fantasy games in the mainline franchise on the scale and with the core expectations of what they have been any longer, whilst also putting them in a genre that doesn't have the broadest attraction. And I understand that that's kind of like the heart of what the franchise is, and that is being lost. And I feel like right now that what they're trying to do is they're creating these multiple lanes for Final Fantasy to exist in. I feel like the stuff that we want out of it, which is everything that like Ralph, you mentioned in your review, and Jake, you said as well, is all stuff that I agree with. Like, I feel like the side quests are so boring, but like they usually have some element of like story or narrative or character building that I'm like, okay, that'll do. I think the itemization is terrible. I think like the world is empty and barren in a lot of ways. I think all that stuff is now contained in the offshoot, which is a remake, which is the Final Fantasy VII remakes. I wouldn't be surprised, although I wouldn't stake my life on it, if they started remaking more of those Final Fantasy games and use the hybrid method for that. Like, and I think the other games will be more of the tricky prospect because like remaking 8 is going to be a bit of a nightmare because I love that game to death, but it is a clusterfuck of a game. Like it is mad. And same with like 9 and maybe even like 10's the next one they remake because they can build that hybrid system and make it work really well. But for them to spend the time and money and effort and marketing on a new mainline Final Fantasy game and have the like cutting edge graphics, because that's one of the core principles of Final Fantasy. It needs to be the best looking game on the market. They always have been, whether that's in actual gameplay or like FMV cutscenes or whatever it may be. They were always ahead of the pack. And if they still want to do that stuff, they can't do it in a gameplay format that is fallen out of favor in a major way. And I feel like that's kind of it where they're at now.
But I feel like a lot of, because I've definitely heard similar criticisms to that, and I feel like a lot of that discussion is kind of mischaracterizing a lot of, certainly what I'm saying, and I know what a lot of other people are saying, because I don't think anyone's saying this game should have been turn-based, you know, and I don't think it's saying it should have been a more traditional JRPG. What I'm sort of saying that I think this is just quite an outdated package in general. You know, if you look at contemporary open world, semi-open world action games, like even you look at your Horizons and your God of Wars and whatever, like they have found a way to tell their stories better through gameplay, and they have more interesting, compelling RPG systems than Final Fantasy was able to deliver. They have a more interesting approach to world design, right? And I think that if you'd have taken a lot of those principles that prop up a lot of those sorts of, like, let's call them Sony games or whatever, and you bolted them onto this package, I actually think I would have really fucking loved this. For me, it was never about like, I don't want this to be an action game. It was like, well, I kind of want it to be just a more interesting action game, like a deeper action game, a game that feels more contemporary, you know what I mean? And I definitely got a lot of that criticism come at me, like, oh, you just don't want the series to change, or you just want it to be a JRPG. And I'm like, no, that's never what I've been personally saying. And I know that's not what a lot of other people are saying as well. So, yeah.
I kind of do just want it to be an RPG, which is the weird thing. Like, I
Sure.
also feel like it's definitely... for everything I said, and I think it's a new version, I feel like it's also not a good execution on what this could have been, as you said. Like, I feel like this is the first step to a better Final Fantasy, a new version of Final Fantasy, which is a shame because you'd expect a team of that caliber to execute way better on a way higher and be more ambitious. But then I also think about like where that team, Final Fantasy as a kind of development studio team, that kind of stuff, it's been passed around. And let's not forget the last mainline entry was salvaging a version of a different game versus and like Business Unit 3 they're the MMO team that has been kind of tasked to put in. So I feel like, not to discredit their abilities, but also it feels like a kind of MMO in a lot of ways. And I think that's why we're at that. I just don't see the confidence in the team to execute on the stuff that we want. Maybe the next one, if they're given another chance at it, or another team that takes that foundation, will have that stuff that we're missing, where it's like a few more characters that are memorable, good writing in the main quest, the story quest, side quest, sorry. And then I hit up Michael Hyam, who reviewed it for us, like 10 hours in, and I was like, am I going to get a new sword ever? What's going on? Like, is anything happening? Like, will I be able to find an Ultima weapon? Or like, am I going to fight a Ruby weapon? Will I ever find a random cave to stumble into? And he was like, nah, not really, man.
No, not really.
And like, that is the stuff that I miss a lot from it. And the hope is like, either this serves as a framework for another team to come along and be like, this is what we're going to inject that stuff back in. Or this serves as a good starting point for this team to build the confidence and come back and do it again. But I think I'm where you guys are, where I get it. I like the game a lot, but I also am pushing aside a lot of the things I love about Final Fantasy to like it.
But that's the thing, because I don't care about the RPG system, because I think for me the highs are so good, the combat is so fun that I don't want to be faffing around in menus. And I say that as a big RPG player. For me, the balance with Final Fantasy 16 is that I'm just enjoying hitting things with my sword and flying around and having all those powers and doing that. Totally agreed on the side quest stuff. My, heart visibly drops every time I see a green icon on the screen that doesn't have a plus sign in it, but I'm still doing all of them. I haven't finished it yet, so comments on the story for me are going to be that I really like what they're doing with it. I find it very interesting. I love, like, Benedicta, Cid, oh my god, Clive. Like, I love genuinely the cast and the characters. And so for me as well, even the fact that it's not truly open world, the way that they're sort of doing the Dragon Age Inquisition map thing of hub worlds and stuff, doesn't bother me so much, because I am so overwhelmed lately with games that have to be big and it has to have everything that you could possibly want to do. This game is going to offer you. And so for me, Final Fantasy 16 is a game that is somehow managing to balance these overwhelming, incredible moments, these huge, impressive boss fights, but then also is big enough that I don't feel like I'm being shortchanged or cheapened on the experience, but it's also showing restraint. And for me, this is just how I'm feeling about games in general at the moment. It's like I actually really appreciate it for that.
Yeah, no, I definitely have heard that as well, and I know a lot of people feel the same way about that. Yeah, personally, I definitely feel the same in many regards in terms of like how I approach games. Is that I don't want every game to be a massive open world game, but I guess I look at what they do have, and I'm like, well, it's just it's smaller, sure, but I just don't think it's working. I don't think it's very good. It's kind of like the fact that it's smaller isn't saving it for me when I know that there's just nothing out there to see. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because like if you're gonna do it,
That's fair.
do it right. You know, rather than and I also saw this comment. I don't even remember where I heard it or saw it, but I was like, I think it was on Reddit or something. Someone said like, you know,
Well, that was your first mistake.
yeah, but it was like, imagine if this game was like half as long, cut out all the filler, and it was just a straight up like linear action game that just went through and did its thing and 100% committed to those things. I reckon that would be a fucking great game. Like
That would
you
be
can
killer. Yeah.
totally. And I think one of the things that has created the divisive or the controversy around this game, or why it's less universally acclaimed, is because it is trying to reach out and do all of the things at once and just kind of like gesture towards those things without committing to them. Versus if this was like, you know, Stranger in Paradise-esque kind of with that singular focus, you might have had a product that I think came together in a more complete sense. It didn't feel like it had so many gaping holes in it, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think sorry, Jake,
especially with the combat. So the combat is one example. I like it. I enjoy it. It's fun. It fulfills the power fantasy thing. And I know I'm like bagging on the game a lot. It's an interesting conversation. Ultimately, I still like the game. But the combat is one example where I was like, oh, cool. Like when I talked to you, when you went to preview the game and, you know, who's behind the combat with like Devil May Cry design philosophy here and there. Like I was hoping for something a little bit more precise and a little bit more crazy. I don't know. Something about it where it just kind of doesn't feel, I don't know. It's hard. It doesn't feel 100%. It feels like 90%. And with something like Final Fantasy, with that being the core gameplay, I was hoping for a little more. I like that you can do basically the stinger attack, like Dante's like stinger. I was like, okay, that's fine. That's good.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was just
love
looking
the
for a
combat.
little more.
Yeah, I'm like having so much fun like figuring stuff out and setting up traps and grabbing enemies and moving them around and doing all the Devil May Cry stuff. So
It's fun to
I'm-
switch on the
What
fly.
a
It's
yeah,
very
but
good.
what a bizarre default layout for those
Yeah,
controls.
it's
What,
it is
in what
very-
way?
Like I changed it after about an hour because I just couldn't cope with it anymore. It was just very weird. Like I don't know. What was it? What was the block? Was
Was it the
R1 to
dodge?
block or something?
R1 is the
On the
dodge.
Oh,
triggers?
dodge, just a dodge. And I was just like, I
Yeah.
cannot get around that. So I changed it
Interesting.
immediately.
Interesting. Okay.
This is one
I've
of the
had a lot of people
this-
who I've talked to have been like, yeah,
Right,
the
yeah.
button layout's
I
weird.
did this is one game where I have been using the DualSense Edge and it's been very, very effective for me.
Me too, actually.
It's
Me too.
so
Exactly
good.
right.
Like having the
Yes.
charge attacks on the paddles has been a game changer for me.
Totally
like
agree.
it's huge.
Totally agree. Yeah, I agree.
Too
The thing
bad
is
the battery
that,
life
like-
is 1.5 hours.
Yeah, it's
That's
so
the
bad.
thing.
eh? It's so bad.
I would love to get a fucking. It sounds like a sex toy, man. What are they doing? DualSense Edge? Are you
Hell
joking?
yeah. Hadn't thought about that,
Like-
but absolutely. Yeah.
Paddle for your pleasure.
Get that on adamandeve.com. I would love to get one, but yeah, battery life I cannot justify. And also, I've said this on this podcast many times that the DualSense in general just makes my hand cramp
Yes.
up.
Oh, really? Wow. Okay.
Yeah,
I love the
and so
DualSense.
that's why I wish, I don't know what it is, but like the Xbox Elite controller for me is just right. It's the Goldilocks.
there's like a-
Oh, more
controller.
fanboyism, more
There's like a
console
weird
wars.
gap.
more Death
Oh,
by
here we
Lucy.
go.
Oh, here we go.
I've been
Yeah,
playing a bunch
Sony
of it and like
Xbox.
my RSI has been killing. 'cause
No
of that
way.
controller.
Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think
that's
it's
part of the
the
reason I had
shape
to
of it.
change.
Yeah.
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 I think where
Um,
it does succeed is I like the world. I actually like some of the side quests bum me out because they weren't as in depth as I was hoping. Because like every time I
Except
got
for
to a
that
new
wolf
environment,
one.
I was what?
What the hell was that wolf one?
Yeah, the Wolf one was a highlight. That was a
God.
Yeah, I was
highlight.
so dark.
For anyone does a
That's
brief
messed
primer
up.
on that is that Clive discovers that a lordling is luring slaves to go and be killed by a wolf to entertain his son. And then Clive needs to figure out what he might do about that. Spoiler
It's
alert,
like-
he doesn't do much about it. So
Well, they get their comeuppance.
no, he does.
yeah, but Clive
Oh,
does
well,
not do that. It's the other guy
Yeah.
that makes it happen. Clive's like,
Oh,
yes,
yes, you're
continue
right.
about your business. Please
Yeah.
continue murdering innocent people. I'm going to go and do other things now, you know?
It's like the one person who was writing that quest was like just an hour before read the Wikipedia page on Joffrey and was like, oh,
Yes,
interesting.
the guy's voice even sounds like it. Little kid sounds like Joffrey. He does. Oh, man.
I like Clive. I like I like the way this story is presented. Granted, it gets kind of messy, but I love a game that just is not afraid to throw me cool cutscenes and let me just
Yeah.
kind of like sink in that. I think Clive is very interesting. There's a lot to him. He almost looks too cool for a Final Fantasy protagonist.
Yes.
What?
Did you see, like when he got his get up?
I was like,
See,
whoa,
like,
Oh.
yeah.
whoa,
I was
dude.
like,
I was
he's dressed like Dracula now, and then I couldn't unsee it after that. I was the rest
Oh
of the game.
my God,
I was
yes.
like,
Yeah.
he's dressed like Dracula.
He does look like Lords of Shadow.
yes,
Era.
yeah.
does. I
Yup.
love that. I love Clive. I love like the relationship. Oh, this messed me up. I've been really struggling to place Jill's actor, and that's the case because there are a lot of like very infamous, famous British actors in this. She's the main female lead, Jenny, from Alan Partridge. This Time with Alan Partridge, and that messed me up. That's a very British reference,
know what that
and
is.
I
The young
It's-
version of her is played by what's her name? Who did Amicia? In,
Charlotte McBurney.
Yeah, Charlotte McBurney.
Yeah.
Oh,
In, Plague Tale.
and
really?
young and
How
and Joshua's
fascinating.
young Joshua's played by the kid who played Hugo, right?
Hugo, yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Cool. That's so awesome.
I think
Yeah, right.
Viserys from Game of Thrones is in there as well somewhere. I think
Really?
It's a really.
Yeah.
I feel like the acting is excellent. I think for the most
Yeah.
part, and
Yeah.
also like the one of the things I will give props to, it's not written like a Final Fantasy game, like a traditional
Yeah.
Final Fantasy. It's closer to the MMO, I think.
I think that's true of the first half. I don't agree with the second
Yes,
half. I think
there's
the
a
second
bit
half
where
is
it
written
goes-
like a Final Fantasy game.
Yes, there's a bit where it goes, "We are Kingdom Hearts now," and you're like, "Okay, cool." But like,
People are going to be so mad in the comment section about that. Just to be clear, Kingdom Hearts, everyone's like, Kingdom Hearts nonsense is Final Fantasy nonsense and vice versa.
yeah,
yes.
it is. I get it.
I'm
also.
saying nothing.
I will say, as a Kingdom Hearts liker, I've reviewed that game. I love Kingdom Hearts. The writing is the highest order of dog shit I've ever
It's
seen.
nonsensical.
It is
Please,
fucking
you're a
awful.
guest on our podcast. Please do
Listen,
not ruin
do
our
not
like
come
ratios.
for my friends. Do not come for my friends. Come for me. I gave Kingdom Hearts 3 an 8 out of 10. I know what makes Kingdom Hearts good. That writing is atrocious.
Oh my god! I'm already terrified of
for
the
it
clips
now.
on Twitter.
I'm-
I've already been
I'm-
through
I'm
it so much this
redirecting
week.
the
I can't
anger
get
away
away
from
Look what you're doing
Ralph,
to
I'm
him.
redirecting the anger away from you now. So like people will be mad at me instead of you.
Hope you enjoyed that clip of the Friends Per Second podcast. To check out the full episode, head over to SkillUp's YouTube channel or search Friends Per Second everywhere you get your podcasts.